Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our presentation on migration paths and planning between Oracle WebCenter Interaction and the WebCenter portal framework and spaces. My name is Kevin Donnelly with TechStream Solutions, and I'm joined by Lee Sommerhalder. A couple of housekeeping notes right at the start. We expect that the webinar is going to run just about an hour. I'm sure that there will be some questions along the way. Go ahead and ask those in the chat. We'll either answer them during the run of the discussion or when we wrap at the end. So what are we looking to cover? What are our topics? We're looking to the migration between WebCenter Interaction and by extension the Plumtree and Aqualogic platforms to the Oracle WebCenter portal platform. We're going to cover a bit of where the portals came from, their similarities and differences, as well as kind of where WebCenter looks to be going over the next few patch sets and then later releases. We'll talk about what a migration can look like, bearing in mind every implementation and every business has its differences, as well as why it's something to consider if you're currently running on one of these legacy platforms. Finally, we'll spend a little bit of time on how that migration comes together, some of the decision points that you're going to run into while going through it, and perhaps some pitfalls to avoid along the way. Before anything else, a moment about ODTUG and the Kscope 13. Don't forget to register for it. The conference is June 23rd through 27th in New Orleans. There will be over 300 technical sessions, Sunday symposiums, hands-on training labs, several networking opportunities with some of the best Oracle developers from around the world. There are a wide variety of sessions covering all sorts of Oracle tooling, and the content will range from beginner to expert. To register, go to www.kscope13.com. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass over to Lee for a few words on TechStream Solutions, who we are, and what we do.
Thank you, Kevin. Again, my name is Lee Sommerhalder. I head our sales and marketing department here at TechStream. As a little background on the company, as you can see, 12 years of marketing experience I've brought to essentially propagate lead generation systems, rapid sales growth, and drive brand identity for TechStream. One of the opportunities given to us by ODTUG was to elaborate on our WCI to WCP migration path, and it is one of the components that makes TechStream an Oracle leader provider of choice. As a background, TechStream really helps companies by providing services, managing support, procuring software, and sourcing talent for basically the leading social business platform, Oracle WebCenter Suite. We're recognized by Oracle as a nationally preferred partner due to basically our extensive IT experience, knowledge of the Oracle WebCenter platform, and our track record of delivering tangible business results to clients, as you'll see in subsequent slides. This consistent commitment to building long-term client relationships plus underlying dedication to the quality and ROI is basically why clients choose TechStream. And as a background between what companies we currently work with, the support offering and the consultancy is loosely based around the 4 S's that we service. So service being a strict consultancy, finding ways for customers to develop solutions that improve their business processes, support, sourcing, which is a differentiating factor of our company, which allows us to attain talent very quickly to work on the projects that we deploy for our clients. Additionally, with May being the prime month for support renewals, we leverage our software practice to do license procurement and annual maintenance restructuring to understand what companies are paying for licensing in the Oracle world and how they can reduce that cost and improve their operations. Overall, TechStream is the WebCenter expert for Oracle. We train Oracle in WebCenter specialties, and if any business comes around in the WebCenter world, we are well prepared to take care of it. So Donnelly, if you'd like to continue with the webinar, I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Lee, no problem. Just going back to WebCenter, I feel that it's important to touch on a little bit of the history of the product, both where WCI has been and where WebCenter Portal has been, as well as how WCI is kind of influencing the direction of WebCenter Portal now and moving forward. I feel really any successful migration need to have that understanding of what the underlying factors are and what the underlying build is. So a little bit of history of WCI, Web Center Interaction, and I'm going to use a lot of terms interchangeably here. It has a long history. It's been a solid system for a good long time. I have 2003 listed here as one major release because there was a very distinct difference when Plumtree Portal came out with 5.0. Really starting to become a true portal product, to be able to pull things from lots of different back-end sources, pulling them all together, adding in those typical portal components of the authorization and then the custom pages and the like. In 2005, BEA went out and acquired Plumtree. So that went from the Plumtree Foundation 6.0 to being renamed as Aqualogic Interaction 6.1, which I know a lot of people are still out there running now, pretty much all of these versions from now on through. The last BEA version was put out in 2008. That was Aqualogic Interaction, or Aqualogic User Interaction at this point, ALUI, 6.5 and 6.5 MP1. Then Oracle obviously purchased BEA right about that same time, and they put out pretty quickly another release, which is the 10GR3 version. A lot of that was branding and such in terms of making an Oracle product from being a BEA product. I think the majority of people who are out there running WCI at this point are on 6.5 or 10GR3. Back in 2011 was the last real major release where they came out with 10GR4. This was something that for a while was codenamed Neo, was 10.3.3. That was the last major release of WebCenter Interaction. There's been a couple of patch releases here and there since then, but that's the last big one that's out there. So for the people who are out there, and I think some of you are probably on the call now listening, who are still running ALUI and WCI, what tends to categorize those? What do we typically see in a long-standing ALUI or WCI implementation? Typically, it's a very mature portal. Partly that's because it's been a few years since the last major release, but also it's had a lot of very loyal users, very loyal customers. There's lots of people out there who have been on 5.0 and then upgraded through 6.1 to 6.5 and then 10GR3. And people tend to fall into two different categories, or some mix of them. There's the very highly customized and tightly integrated solution where you have a few dozen PEIs and a lot of use of the, of the Aqualogic IDK. Or the other kind of side of it is something that is very self-contained. ALUI and WCI was very well put together to be something that can be set up to be very business-oriented, be able to kind of push off some of that administration, delegate the administration to the business users, and it can be very self-contained and be a very solid portal that is typically then ends up being very content-oriented and includes a lot of user-generated content, all in one kind of standalone section. So you see a little bit of both of those. So because of that, there's a lot of good reasons that people have stuck with it for so long, and particularly now continuing to stick with it. First off, and the obvious one, if you're happy with it, you're not going to want to move off it. And there's a lot of people who are very, very happy with the implementations over the years. I've done a number of them myself with whether they're migrations or new installations. And I've been very, very happy with it as a product. I know a lot of you are happy with it as well, too. But that said, also there's a lot of wanting to take your time when you're moving technically, move very deliberately. The people who like to be right on the edge of the new custom technology, the new things that come out, when something's been stable for a few years, it probably moved off at this point. But a lot of people would like to see a very static, slow, take your time, make sure you make the right choices and make the right decisions as you move on. The system being a fit is obvious, but one thing that I've run into a number of times now when I've gone and talked to people and gone up to who have been running Aqualogic for a while or running WebCenter Interaction for a while, and the question comes up, well, okay, you have all these needs, or you have, in some cases, these issues with it. Why now to move off it? What's the driving force there? And some of it is when there is a smaller IT department that's running it, and the guy who really knows the system left a couple of years ago, but everyone else knows how to kind of keep it up and running. And this obviously doesn't just apply to a portal platform. You see this all over the place. The guy who knows got it set up and it's there and it's running, but there's no real internal desire for someone to take a big chunk of time, go out there, figure out the ins out of the system. It's there, it works, we're happy with it, let's keep moving on. And honestly, there are always higher priorities out there. So with all that in mind, why now? Why is now a good time, and in some cases a necessary time, to look at moving off of this platform and moving on to a new one? The main one, and the initial one, is that support is always a question whenever you're working with your Oracle products. And since it's been a few years since the major releases at this point, the changes are upcoming. So if you're on Aqualogic User Interaction 6.5, barring anything specific in your case, Premier support wrapped up a couple months ago. Premier support ended March 2013. So whatever renewals are coming up, you might need to move on to extended support, which obviously has its own changes and potential costs associated with that. Extended support will run out in March of 2016. So now that's 3 years out, but it's kind of still in the window. For WCI, for the most recent releases, Premier support will end this coming it's coming January of 2014. So we're getting to the point where the support costs are going up. The ability that you can count on there being any sort of new releases or new upgrades or new functionality being added to it really isn't there anymore. Initially, stepping back a moment ago, we had said one of the reasons that people like taking it slow and like taking very distinct steps is that you don't necessarily want to be right on the cusp or right on the edge of new technology. You no longer need to be to move off of it. WebCenter portal now, as we'll talk about in a few slides, has been around for a bit of time. It's got its feet under it. It is a far more solid product than it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And now that we kind of have, some people who have gone out and done this migration and guided process from one to the other, you're no longer kind of feeling this out as you go. You're kind of skipping the do-it-yourself and starting to have a good, solid plan to move from one to the next. And that's one of the things I'm going to continue to hit on as we go through the importance of having that plan that you can look back to make sure that at any point you know where you are and what's coming and what you've already done. Finally, for a lot of people, honestly, it's time for something that's a more modern portal. WCI has had a great run. It's a great product, but it is certainly showing its age, not just in the interface, but in what it can integrate to, what it can move on. If you're looking to leverage particularly some of Oracle's other Fusion Middleware products and the like, it's about time to move on to a portal that can really take good advantage of that. So going from there to what the actual migration plan is and talking through what WebCenter portal also is and gives. So what do you expect when you're looking to make the move? First off, all web centers are not alike. So what does that mean? This isn't an upgrade. A lot of people, because of the tendency to have the names be the same, Web Center Interaction, Web Center Portal, are all kind of in that same family. This isn't a straight upgrade from one to the next. This is a distinct migration. There's not a run this script and all of a sudden everything comes up and gets up and going. It's an entirely different infrastructure. It is the code base is different. The integrations. There are some that are similar, which we'll talk about as we go. There are some that are easy to make that move from one to the other. But just as with any other scenario, anything that you've got that is very deeply integrated or tightly integrated, you're going to have to rework and you're going to have to do some rewriting. And it's important to know that and to take that into account up front. Going back to the previous example, if you have a number of PEIs that are in there, and for those of you who haven't worked in it, a PEI is it's a programmable event interface. It's essentially just a piece of code that plugs into Aqualogic or Web Center Interaction. It kind of intercepts and does some things along the way. If you need to change something that happens every login or something along those lines. Those are the kinds of things you take that and say, okay, there's not necessarily a one-to-one mapping here. We can't pick up this code and drop it over into Web Center Portal. So how am I approaching this? What is the way that I'm doing this now? What is the way I'm going to want to leverage to do that in the future? Because of all that, this is not the project to learn on your feet. It is very important, particularly from my point of view, to have a good, solid understanding of what you have in the portal now and what you have in the portal that you are moving to, so that you can look at them and say, it's not just a question of picking up this functionality and dropping it over here, but is this the right way to do it? Is this the most efficient way to do it, both in terms of how much time do you have now, how long is it going to take to do now, what is the maintenance going to be like going forward, and nobody wants to get into a situation where they go through a painful move of something and find out there was a much better and faster and easier way to do this. And that goes back to the ROI, that goes back to everything that goes into making a migration a successful one. So a little bit about WebCenter Portal, in case there are any of you out there who are Louis and WCI focused and don't really have too much insight into what the Oracle WebCenter platform is now. You see that the little image over there on the right-hand side with the puzzle pieces. That's the overall Oracle's WebCenter platform. There's 4 different components to it. What we're really going to focus on is the portal side, with a little bit of crossover into the content management. But the WebCenter portal, it's an open portal platform. It looks to meet all of the major standards around portal. It opens itself up. It's very integrative. You can integrate into, not just going back and hitting portlets, but hitting some external cache flows. You can integrate .NET portlets into it. You can integrate SharePoint web parts into it. There's lots of kind of ability to reach out and to pull in things, not just custom code, but also other pieces within the overall Oracle Fusion middleware stack. Pull it on in. It focuses on identify users. Now, what does that mean? It means that primarily it is dealing with people who come and log in, or whether if they don't log in, we otherwise SSO them in, or the portal knows who you are. It's not quite so much aimed at the, okay, I'm going to go out and be that business front end and try and pull people who don't have any, who I don't know anything about other than, hey, they're visiting my site, and try and convert them. That falls more into the WebCenter sites kind of web experience piece of it. So Portal, we're looking to deal with people who we know who they are, be able to present a personalized experience, a customized experience, both intranets and extranets. And also particularly when you move to talking about the spaces pieces of it, building up collaborative work groups, kind of an area that, hey, this is a project or some other sort of workspace where you may have a number of people coming together and doing their work collaboratively in the same space. That, if that sounds familiar to those of you who are out there with WCI and Louis, there's a lot of correlation between the idea of the WebCenter space and a community within WCI, and that's some of the parts that we'll talk about in a little bit as well. So what does it look to do in addition to just bringing these people together? It's application aggregation and delivery. It's going out and saying, I need a little bit from here, I need a little bit from there, and pull them all together onto the same page and make it easier for people to do their work from day to day. Again, pretty standard stuff from a portal perspective, and a lot of direct correlation there to what Louis and WCI has been doing for years. WebCenter Spaces, you may have heard of as well, is actually a pre-built application that's on top of the portal. At least that's what it is at this point. In a couple of slides, we'll talk a little bit about the release history of what WebCenter Portal has and some upcoming changes along those lines. But that's what brings in those team-focused workspace. Again, very similar to communities. It can go from an assignation perspective. So you say, I'm going to go out and say, anyone who's a member of these groups is going to be part of this community or part of this space. You can have it be self-selected, the ability of kind of opening it up and saying, okay, if you're interested in this space in this group, you can come on and join it, and then automatically get added into your navigation and all the like. They can be IT managed. They can be self-sufficient. Again, another correlation kind of with the communities, being able to say, set this up or give the permission to a business user to go up and set up this space, spin it off, work it from a template. It's a very strong and solid templating mechanism, even more so than communities were beforehand, to be able to set it up and kind of go off on their own with minimal IT involvement if necessary. Business users can do that management. It comes pre-integrated with WebCenter services as well. WebCenter services are a whole kind of range of stood-up pieces and flows and services that from a license perspective, they're included with the portal and everything else. So that's one less concern you have to worry about. But it provides things like the blogs and the wikis and the polling and the collaborative discussion boards. And a lot of the things that, again, going back to the Louis and WCI mentality, you're thinking, okay, these are similar to some of the things that Studio used to get. These are similar to some of the things you get in collaboration, similar to some of the things that you get in Publisher. And again, the focus of Spaces is more so than just something that's built on the portal framework, is a quick time to release. It gets set up quick. You could turn it on, and it is, more or less ready to go, pending, decisions on look and feel and all that sort of a thing. but get it up and going with minimal IT involvement. So where did Web Center Portal come from? Well, it was an Oracle-built product. It was released initially in 2007, and it was really built to be the kind of center pole of their portal presence. At that point, Oracle tends to go out and acquire. So there's a whole number of portal platforms and portal products that fall under the Oracle umbrella at this point. Oracle Portal was their own thing. WebLogic Portal, which was a BEA thing, which they had even before they acquired Plumtree. Then Web Center Interaction, which, again, we've been talking about. And then when they bought Sun, they took up Sun One Portal as well. It was more of a kind of an aggregation engine sort of thing. But it's still there. They've got a lot of not just portal technology, but people who use portals kind of under their roof. So they kind of, looking at all of these things, said, okay, we're going to pull kind of the best from here, a little piece from here, a little piece from there, and kind of build it together and work on creating that central product. The first release was early in 2007, which was Web Center 10G. Really up until, the 11G came out with the rest of the Oracle 11G releases in 2009. The portal really first became stable and functional to the point that you can look at and really make a good, solid recommendation that, yes, this is something you can look to use in a production environment without kind of really being on that edge with Patch Set 3, PS3, January 2011. About a year later, PS5 was released that added some additional functionality, some additional speed, and some additional stability as well. Just early this month, I should say, not quite May yet, PS6 was released, which was mainly a bug fix release, but also had some continual improvements in speed and moving forward. PS7 is an interesting one that's currently in the beta program, and as we talk about spaces, that kind of continues to move the ball forward with aiming towards the web tooling, aiming towards that kind of business interaction that WCI and Louis did so well. That's definitely the direction at this point that the Web Center Portal is going on. We talk about this a little bit here. Similarities in focus and in function. One of the decisions, and honestly probably the first major decision that you look at when you're saying, I'm going to implement Web Center Portal, whether it's a new install or a migration, is saying, what am I looking at? Am I going to go with a custom portal that is built up on the Web Center Portal framework, which is essentially a large Java API? It gives you all the hooks, it gives you all the starting points, and from that point you kind of go on your own. Or do I start from Web Center Spaces, which is, like I said, that pre-built application. It's kind of your starting point, and it's actually more similar to when you stick a WCI or a Louis on for the first time and you start it up and you say go. Well, you go there and you've got your header and your footer, and you've got a user experience there. You've got a pretty detailed administrative experience. You've got a lot of things there that you can kind of work from. And if you don't want to go back to the code, if you don't want to write any custom Java code or .NET code, since Louis and WCI supported both of those natively, if you don't want to do all that, you don't have to. You can do all of your administration, or the vast majority of your administration, of your setup, of your page creation, community creation, and content creation through the web, through web tooling. And Web Center Portal Spaces kind of fills that same sort of mold. When you set it up and you go, you've got a baseline. You have the ability to create templates for both pages and spaces right away, and you have the ability to go in and do the vast majority of what it is you're looking to do through an overall web interface. A couple of other things that where the crossover is there. Spaces is similar to the community-focused WCI. So it's business user-focused, like I said before, and minimal IT involvement, if that's what you're looking for, or if that's what it needs to be. There's a distributed governance model. What does that mean? That means that you can pass off control and administration over some of the different areas to different sets of business users. So if you have a particular workspace that you're setting up around an individual project, and you say, okay, this project is out there, I want this project manager, who maybe has had a little bit of training or at least some familiarity, to be able to run with it and do whatever they want within their space. You can do that. You can give a significant amount of administrative rights out to those individual sources to go. Also, the continual focus on the web tooling. Coming forward in PS7 again, which is in beta, and per Oracle, you take with whatever grains of salt as you typically do when you're talking about release dates, is set up for somewhere around late summer in that range. And there's a lot of additional pieces in that that kind of feel, to me at least, WCI inspired. It's tying spaces much more tightly into the overall environment. You have something that's going to be similar to the experience definitions, where you have the ability to break out and to go into different directions based on, are you coming in as a mobile device, are you coming in as a tablet device? And these are things that can always be done with code and can always be done with changes on the framework side, but are now going to also continue to be built in and to be able to be leveraged, again, very easily by a team that may not be heavily IT. The other side of that, for those of you who like getting your hands dirty in on the APIs, the portal framework underlying both spaces and the ability to take that and to build up a custom portal from it, that's much more similar to if you want to go in. One of the great things about WCI and the LUI is that the entire API was exposed, and not just things for, okay, I have a portlet or I have a web service that I'm setting up, and I want to be able to get names and be able to get groups and such as it goes through. But from a very base level, with the ability to basically rewrite any class that the portal is using, any piece of code that the portal is using anywhere in it. You write it, you hit to the right interface, you drop it into place, you do one small piece of configuration, and now the portal is running using that instead. It's very straightforward, and I've worked with a number of different portal products, and it was much easier than any of the others to be able to go in and change something that's happening at a very base level. If that's the kind of work that you've been doing with your portal, that's the kind of direction that you want to go in, then the option to look at primarily, if not finally, is taking a look at the WebCenter portal framework. And that basically has the same sort of thing. You start it from ground zero. You start it with when you start up a new portal, you have a header, a footer, and a home page with nothing on it, and that's it, and that's what you get. There's administration that goes along with it, but from there you can build up any direction you want in any way you want. And it's worth pointing out that WebCenter Spaces was obviously built on top of that framework. So Oracle kind of took the same process and went in the same direction to get to this place. So one of the analogies that I like to use is if you're looking to get a new house, right, and you have two options. You have that empty lot that's over there. It's in a great location. It's a great lot. You know what you want to build, and you're going to be able to design the whole thing, blueprints all the way up to get there. By the end of it, you know that you'll have exactly what it is that you want, and there's a certain amount of both cost and time and experience and technical ability necessary to get to that point. Or you could turn around and say, hey, look over there. This is a house that's already in place. It's also in a great lot. It's in a great location. Yeah, I know that, maybe I'm going to need to tear out the kitchen and put in the island that my wife has always wanted in the middle there and knock out a wall in the upstairs to expand the master bath. But then I'll be able to get there. And then that's kind of a little bit more like what Space is. It gives you that good, solid starting point. And you can either go with it or you can go ahead and make the modifications as we move forward. So keeping on, what are some of the key points of being able to have a successful migration plan? Identify and migrate the functionality and not the implementation. So what does that mean? It means taking a look at what you have abstractly as well as functionally. So if you take a look and say, okay, I have a whole slew of publisher portlets, and we're using a lot of content management. We're using it for a lot of different ways. So, the kind of the first pass of things is, okay, I'm going to identify all of this content. I'm going to take a look at all of this stuff. And I just want to make sure, how do I know that I can move all of this over to the new environment? How can I move all of this over one way or another? And one of the key points to consider as you go through is what needs to be moved. What is the business purpose behind having that there? And is it useful to move? And that will save both time and effort as you're doing a migration. And that's, what I call legacy creep. Particularly in a situation where you've got a system that's been around since 5.0. You've upgraded 6.1, you've upgraded 6.5, you've upgraded 10GR3. one of the good things about Louis and WCI is it's always been very backwards compatible. So it's always been very easy to make those moves. For the same time, now maybe you've got a lot of stuff stuck around that made sense at the time and was there at the time, and it's move forward and move forward and move forward because it's been easy to do so. Is that needed? Figure out what is going to be needed moving forward. Focus on those key pieces of functionality and those key pieces of content to get from one to the other. And then when you're looking at the functionality gap, because whenever you're moving from one system to the other, you're going to take a look and say, okay, there's some things that this new system is, perhaps maybe doesn't do quite as well as the old, but there's going to be some things that it does much, much better. So plan for both of those. Don't just look and say, how am I going to take care of these things that the old system does and everyone's used to, and everybody does it this way. They know it's going to take 4 clicks to get here, and they know it's going to, they're going to hit 3 different keystrokes, and all of a sudden everything's submitted. Not just how do we replicate that, or does that need to be replicated, but take a look at what else is out there. If you move it from the example that I like to use here, and one of the things that we'll be talking about is content, right? So if you have a lot of publisher portlets out there, WebCenter Content is the back-end content management system for WebCenter Portal. From a licensing perspective, there's a limited use license that's included with the portal suite, which allows essentially you set up and run WebCenter Content and leverage that as long as it's only through the portal. And obviously, content is its own thing and a pretty massive, robust content management system, which is beyond the scope of anything I'm talking about right now. But the point being, there's a lot more to it than Publisher had. Publisher was very, very focused and very, very tightly integrated, but it was also very, very limited. Even when you expanded to include the document management capabilities that collaboration gave, or what Knowledge Directory did, which was kind of trying to mimic a document management system, even though it's with stuff kind of still living in its own various places. So take a look at that additional functionality that you have. If you try to move that one-to-one, you replace, say, the Knowledge Directory with, I don't know, a customized Oracle SES crawler or a secure enterprise search crawler, which can do some of the same things. You're pulling together lots of different documents that live in their own various locations and creating something, whether it's a Knowledge Directory card or whether it's something else that is essentially a record of that information. Take a look and see what else is there. Take a look and see, do we have the opportunity to take a big step forward by perhaps taking advantage of some of the new things that are out there. Running side by side, that's always something that gets brought up. It is certainly a potential stopgap. I have a slide specifically on that a few down from now. It's certainly not necessary, but whenever you're doing a massive migration, particularly one where both sides tend to work well together, then that's an option. It's certainly something to consider both pre-migration and post-migration. Finally, take a look at the infrastructure, take a look at the interfaces. So look at the systems that you've got in place, look at where it's going to be running. Use the migration as an opportunity to not just say, are there, is there some niggling little problem with these servers that we've always said, well, we want to fix it, we just don't have the opportunity to. Again, migration is a good time to look at doing that. And the same thing applies to the user interface. That also kind of takes into account the legacy creep. You can absolutely take the out-of-the-box Louis or WCI interface and replicate that almost exactly within WebCenter Portal or WebCenter Spaces if you wanted to. Is there ever a reason to, other than people being used to it? Take the opportunity to take a look at both. If you like the out-of-the-box stuff, if you don't care about the splash, if you just want something that's usable, take a look at this out-of-the-box interface. If it is something else, if it's, hey, we've got a pretty detailed setup, we've gone through a number of different iterations, there's a lot of good stuff out there, take a look, even if it's just a refactoring the underlying code that has, or the underlying HTML that has the ability to improve performance, to improve the turnaround, and to really make it really a more modern look and feel as you go through. So when you're planning, there's a whole bunch of different components of WCI or Louis that I'm sure some of you out there are reasonably familiar with, and then these are kind of ideas how they end up mapping to things that live in WebCenter Portal. I'm not going to go through each of these arrows. and I'll just use a potential scenario kind of coming up in the middle of how you go about it. But the point being is, in some of these things, it's reasonably straightforward from one-to-one. You've got, if you've got an authentication provider you're using in WCI that you're using to go back and you're talking to Active Directory, well, there's pretty much a one-to-one correspondence with the way the WebCenter portal does it, which is it turns around, it leans on WebLogic. WebLogic has its authentication providers. Not the same code, but a lot of the same things are available out of the box, and if not, then it's reasonably straightforward to get from one to the other. Whereas something that's a little bit maybe more complex, WCI web services and portlets are kind of a wide range of things. When this goes back kind of to Plumtree 5.0 and came up with the idea of calling this thing a web service because it was a service that was put out over the web. Well, that's a term that means something very, very different now. So whereas WCI, when you're saying, okay, I'm going to create a web service and I'm going to point at this, it can be pointing to just a flat HTML page. It can be pointed to a struts application. It can be pointed to a .NET application. It can be pointed to any number of different things. And because of that, there are different directions that you can use to migrate those over or to re-implement them or reintegrate with them in WebCenter portal, including they stay the same way they are now. The same sort of thing, but in reverse, or not so much in reverse, with the experience definitions. When you're trying to point a user down a particular road when they come in, identify who the user is, where they're coming from, I'm going to send you over to one of the other different places based on that. There's a few different ways to go about implementing that in WebCenter portal. So moving on. One potential scenario. So the example is we've got a long-term WCI or Aqualogic user. They've gone through a couple of different upgrades, and right now they're on Louis 651. They have a medium-sized business, multiple offices, a little bit spread out, and a reasonably small IT department. So because of that, they've been using Louis as really a sort of standalone kind of environment. Highly integrated with Active Directory. Everybody who uses this portal is a corporate user. They all have an Active Directory user. Louis is turning around and integrating with Active Directory in order to get all of its permissions and its authentication and authorization going down. They use Publisher for content management. Collaboration, a bit here and there, mainly using some of the document sharing and some of the, the document sharing and maybe the discussion boards that are on there. And the communities that they have are mainly department-based. A couple of team ones that are kind of integrated with those collaboration. So how do you go about putting this together? How do you go about building that plan? So we break it down into basically 5 different components, 5 different parts. Discover, design, and plan first off, and this is really trying to set you up for a good migration, for a good starting point. Take a look at, kind of do that first deep dive analysis. What is out there? Find everything that's being used that's out there. Put it together. Put together your list. Figure out, is this usable? Is this feasible to move forward? Now, some of that can be automated. We have a number of utilities, and I know that there's certainly the technical ability out there probably on this line to be able to go out and write some as well. To go in and say, okay, what am I looking at a publisher? I go into the Publisher Explorer and I've got what seems like 500 different portlets that are out there. What's there? Well, okay, well, here's utility you run. You point at a publisher. You say go, and it puts together this nice little list of here's all the items that are out there. Here's you've got 10 different portlets, and they're available in 2 or 3 different languages a piece, perhaps, and they've got anywhere from 0 to 5,000 pieces of content aside. So you do that initial discovery, and then you move on to a high-level design. And that's when you say, take a look at everything you have. Where are the gaps, including the infrastructure gaps? This certainly could be a situation where you're looking. They've been running it for some time. Take a look at the server. The server might, there might be some questions there from a, is this what you want to continue to run your portal on, et cetera, et cetera. Find those gaps, and that's when we go back to kind of this arrow type sheet. So we say, okay, well, someone who's using your collab documents, using that document sharing, what can you turn around and leverage once to the portal? Well, WebCenter Content is a very robust content management system, which includes document management. It includes a lot of things that are associated with that. And there, within Spaces, in particular, there are a number of task flows that go out and integrate with content with the intent of, I'm going to bring this forward for collaboration. I'm going to bring this forward. I'm going to tie comments to it. I'm going to tie the ability to put tags on it. I'm going to make it so that that check-in and check-out process is very streamlined. It can be done either back-end through content or right through the portal and Spaces interface. How does that work? How do you set that up? How do you get that going? Are there gaps there? Are there more pieces of functionality there? That's the approach that you end up taking during this kind of high-level design session. The same thing applies kind of, do you have a large set of stuff in the knowledge directory, or do you have it, or in addition to that, do you have it where there's a lot of documents being uploaded? Maybe it's not in Collab, maybe it's in the actual document repository, there's a PT upload, where it's pulling it up and it's sitting there and then creating the cards against knowledge directory with it. Again, something else that can be leveraged into what's in the content. We've talked about some of the other ones on here already, so I feel like I'm just blabbering if I keep going through there. So you finish that kind of high-level design, put together how we're going to go about that, and then from there you build out your plan. And the reason that you wait to this point to do that is you want to make sure that you have your arms around what it is that ends up needing to be done. And it's not just like a leverage back at the beginning, like I mentioned back at the beginning, where you have, this is not the project to learn on your feet. This is going to be, it's going to be complex, and there's going to be certainly some twists and turns that it'll take as you go through, but it's doable, and there is a path, there is a kind of a direct path to get there. So once you identified those, you can take a look and say, here's the breakdown, here's what the time is it's going to take, here's the resources internally, externally, whatever that's going to be needed for it, and only then should you move on to the detailed design and development. Okay, we start taking a look at what's going to be moved directly across and what we're going to end up reworking in some fashion or other, whether that's the page templates, whether that's the skinning and the CSS and everything that's associated with it. And again, finally, how can you leverage the existing content and data? How can you do that migration? Some of that is a combination of utilities and configuration. So you're going to export, perhaps there's the ability to turn around and export things out of Collab using a custom utility and then go and stick them out into the discussion server. Or again, with content, pulling things out of Publisher. Well, with Publisher, it tended to kind of embed a lot of those look and feel components to it. So how do you approach that? There's 2 or 3 different ways to go, and I'll talk about Publisher specifically in a minute. To be able to get it out of there and then stick it in something that's a little bit more acceptable of content management. The last bit that I have a line on there is consider running it side by side. I mentioned it earlier, and here it is again. How do you bring functionality across that split between WebCenter Portal and WebCenter Interaction? It kind of goes both ways. One way to go that I have recommended and seen work well in the past is if you have a WCI environment and you're looking at a migration to WebCenter Portal. WebCenter services were even initially kind of put out as something that can be turned around and consumed by WebCenter Interaction. So what are WebCenter services? I mentioned it earlier. Little individual kind of standalone. Some of them are standalone applications. Some of them are standalone services. The discussion boards falls under that. The polling and surveys fall under that. The events service, where you have kind of the idea of group events, falls under that. A lot of different kind of silos of services, many of which can be either directly consumed within WCI, or maybe you have an initial WebCenter Portal, WebCenter Spaces server set up that those pages can then be turned around and consumed by WCI. Or down at the bottom there, for those of you who have been around the platform for a while, you might remember something called Aqualogic Ensemble. That's kind of been rebranded and turned into something called Pagelet Producer, which is now an integrated part of WebCenter Portal. And it's kind of expanded past just WCI, although in things you have for WCI, if you're on that or you're thinking about moving to that, Ensemble is much more tightly integrated there than it was before. You have the ability to create a remote server that is directly tied into Pagelet Producer, and you can say, okay, I'm going to create a portlet directly from that without, just through a UI perspective of click here, click there. Now I've got it. Excuse me. And that can kind of stand in front, and it's built partly to allow that sort of direct bringing in of the services. So if you want to consume a particular set of task flows, that Document Explorer, Document Manager, which is essentially a Windows Explorer-like look inside the browser that pointing at something within WebCenter content, pointing at a directory back there. That's something that you can do that you can immediately pull forward. So to your end users, to the users who are actually going on and logging into your system, what are some of the ways that you can bring them, introduce that functionality a little bit at a time, maybe get some of those benefits kind of served up a little bit up front before the big massive migration, so you don't have people thinking, well, what are you doing for the next however many months? Maybe I can just put something out there and get it out, get it exposed a little bit sooner. And that also assists, at the end of the day, there's familiarity there. So when you move from WCI to WebCenter Portal and you make the larger switch, there's already content there. There's already familiarity there. It's going to be one step easier for your end users. And reverse is true as well. Once that switch is made, or maybe you don't do any of that pre-stuff, but once you've gone over to WebCenter Portal, both through Pageflow Producer, you can turn around and leverage some of the same web services and portlets that you've been running in WCI. So if you've got a large set of custom portlets that's sitting out there, maybe they're being exposed just as structs apps, maybe they're being exposed as JSP applications, maybe there's a .NET app back there that's leveraging some things, and you want to continue to bring that forward, you've got some options, whether it's as a WSRP, a true web service, whether it's consuming it through OmniPortal as a plugin for WebCenter Portal, which used to come from Oracle Portal and does some immediate bringing in of content as well, or through Pageflow Producer, configuring it to go back and talk to your standing up WCI or a LUI environment. There are options to make that transition easier and simpler as you go from one to the other. So one more note on the possible migration scenario. Some things to consider about if you're looking to migrate publisher content to WebCenter content. And this is a little bit of a more specific one, but I wanted to give a couple of examples of the checklist, the question list that would go down when you're taking a look at doing this. So first off, out-of-the-box publisher portlets. If any of you are still using Publisher or are using Publisher and you remember these, there's kind of this news and this announcement set up out of the box. And a lot of the times, those are the first ones that get set up because, honestly, those are some of the ones that are most often looked for and used in a portal environment. And a lot of times, you set that up, you get it going, it's good, people are using it, and there's not necessarily the need or the desire to move off of that out-of-the-box functionality. Well, okay, you have the out-of-the-box functionality. We know what that is. We can put a box around that, and we built up for WebCenter content. Here are a similar set of templates and reading definitions and such things that are specific to WebCenter content, but essentially match those more or less one-to-one. They give a little bit more flexibility. They give a little bit more ability to do some things. And we can pull that content out of Publisher and stick it right into WebCenter content, and then you're much of the way there already. If that's not the case, you've done some custom stuff, great. So take a look at those content items. Take a look at what it is that you're wanting to do inside WebCenter content. Are they file-based or are they metadata only? So what does that mean? Is it a Word doc where you're actually taking that Word document and exposing that document, or exposing that document in an HTML rendering of it or a PDF rendering of it? Or are you working with something that is just essentially some pieces of metadata that are pulled together? Publisher is an example of something that is metadata only. I'm going to have a title and a blurb and some specific content around this news article, and then when it comes time to see it, I format those together into HTML and display it. The collaboration server, on the other hand, collaboration in the document library within that are more examples of something that's file-based. I've got a Word doc that I'm downloading, I'm editing, I'm re-uploading, something along those lines. Take a look at the presentation template, the stuff that you have that actually does that formatting into a HTML render, into an HTML usable system. Does it make sense to actually migrate that over? Or is that something you're going to want to rework and redo with a new look and feel to begin with? Again, identify what content you want to migrate, what content you want to archive, and what you want to remove. So the difference is there, again, if you've got something that you've got press releases, you've been using the system for the last 10 years, you have 10 years of press releases out there, do you need to bring all 10 over? Or can you say, you know what, older than 7 years, I'm going to forget it, I'm just going to leave it, it's not going to be moved over. Older than 1 year, it's still going to be available, but I'm not going to worry about making it look pretty. I'm not going to worry about matching it to look and feel and going through and changing those formats. I'm just going to stick it over in this archive over here. It's going to still look a little bit like the old site. If you want to get to it, they have their way of getting to it if they need to. And then which you can just migrate over, and you need to take a look and say, all right, I need to maybe go in and substitute out some of these forms, or I need to go into Publisher and modify the presentation template, do a publish of everything, so that it's in a format that will make sense in new environment, then move that version over. Finally, from publisher, CC tags. If you need to know what those are, you probably already do know what those are. You need to look at a mitigation plan for that, whether it's substituting it in using JSTOL or something else in the front end, or revising how those end up getting published in order to make use of them. It's kind of the direction you go. How does that actually translate into a project? I know we have a time check. We're starting to run a little bit short, so I'm going to try and get through these last couple reasonably quickly so we can hopefully answer some questions as well. How does this translate into an overall project? Okay, so that initial discovery approach, that discover, define, plan, that drives the high-level design. That is something that generally I recommend and we recommend that you do upfront and almost as its own separate thing. It's a lead into whatever else you want to do, regardless of whether you end up looking at, well, you know, I prefer something that's a little bit more agile, I'm just kind of doing it as you go, or something that is more of a true waterfall. You still need to know upfront what it is you're doing. So taking that and doing that initial, you know, we call it a quick stream within our methodology, that initial approach, discover, design, and plan, and the output of that is you have your list of requirements, you have your high-level design, you have your project plan for moving forward. That can turn out to be very detailed. You can individualize that and make it very specific for, here is the plan for the application migration, here is the plan for content migration, here's the plan for collaboration, so that if it is a large set of things that needs to be done, you have your arms around all of them. And really, for any migration, not just this one, that is basically the key. You need to make sure you have your arms around it. You need to make sure you have your plan to go from here to there. You know, use what tools you have, use what things are available. So the quick wrap-up, this is, you know, the standard, what do we bring to the table here? Methodology, all the stuff I just talked through. I talked through some of the design documentation and decision trees that we have around when you're looking to do that publisher to content migration. You know, we have that for a lot of other forms as well. So we bring that to the table. We bring that knowledge and experience. You know, we know WCI and Louis. We know WebCenter portal. So we know kind of both sides of it and can get around and avoid some of those gotchas that are there. You know, what happens if you already have WebCenter content out there, or you are installing it for the first time, and you want to leverage some of the stuff in framework folders? How can you get framework folders working within, you know, WebCenter portal, WebCenter spaces? You know, we've got that solved. So there's lots of things that are there that, you know, we can avoid those gotchas. We can get around it. We can move on. I'll toss it back to Lee for the next step slide, and then I think we'll open up for some questions as well.
Thank you, Donnelly. Just like to close out with thanking everybody for the opportunity to present this to you guys. We are reachable in a multitude of ways. Most pervasive would be LinkedIn. If you guys have a chance to visit LinkedIn, just type in TechStream and you'll find us. I'd appreciate you guys to follow. We post content regularly about these kind of things, and moving forward in 2013, we've got some great things on the horizon for a lot of different solutions in the industry. So again, I appreciate you guys reaching out. As a call-to number, if you have a pen and paper, feel free to reach out at 1-800-TechStream.
All right, and I'll pick up a couple of questions, at least one that we've got come up. Have TechStream developed any API to API migration tool for things like content, community structure, and security? Three vastly different things. I'm going to address each of them separately and quickly, given the time that we're looking at. So the security model is something that's very different. Honestly, no, we haven't looked at doing an API to API from a security model because they are very different, and they're actually different whether you look at, are you doing it in the portal framework, or are you doing it in spaces. Security, to me, is something that you need to take a look at holistically. You need to take a look at it in the overall kind of environment that you're working in and the infrastructure you're working in. So that's honestly something that I would recommend doing a plan and then building up from scratch rather than trying to do some sort of a migration of security pieces, unless that's, you know, if you've got your own standalone external database. You know, certainly have people who have some sort of kind of third-party setup along the security matter. There's ways to approach that. But generally, security is something you want to take a fresh look at when you're moving from one system to another, whether it's these portals or something, or content or something else. Community structure. Community structure, there are, and we don't really have the depth to get into this now, but feel free to reach out through the info at TechStream. We could talk a little bit more about this. One of the things that I think is absolutely great about WebCenter portal, which would have, if it existed in WCI, would have solved a ton of problems in a lot of different places, is it has kind of an abstracted navigation model. It has the ability to define, here is what my overall structure looks like, whether it's spaces or whether it's pages or whether it's anything, external links out to dynamic calls to content that can be built directly into the nav and doesn't necessarily rely on the underlying structure. So in WCI, if you're doing anything remotely out of the box, your page and your kind of overall structure is based on, here's the community, and maybe your community has one page, or maybe your community has no pages and just has sub-communities. But you have to build up your tree of, here's your top-level sub-communities, here's your next-level sub-communities, going on deeper and deeper until you get whatever your overall sitemap looks like. That is all entirely abstracted away. So you can have your set of spaces essentially defined over here, and there's still the concept of subspaces where there's permissions, inheritance, and the like to go along with it. But you can have your navigation separate from that, and you can have things like your external URLs where you're going off to, some internal objective or some internal site listed in that separately. So that's community structure. Content, yes, although not directly. We have API to come out, API to put in, and the reason for doing that is a lot of the times we're going to want to do some tweaks, whether it's pulling out PT tags, whether it is modifying HTML classes that are coming through because they're going to look a little bit differently on the other side. So we aim to pull it out. We do any modifications that have to be done when it's essentially in a format that we know, we understand, and we control, and then we import it in and we move it in. So that's the kind of the direction and directive that we take for migration of content. I know we are right about at the time. Do we have any other questions that are out there? All right. So thank you all for attending. If you have any questions, the contact information is up on the screen. Email, the web, LinkedIn, whatever direction you want. We're out there. We're listening. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today.